we are going to start with the webinar. Fernando, if you want, I pass the floor to you to start with Chiara Giovanni. Hello, thank you very much, Chiara. Thank you very much, Fernando, for organizing this workshop.
Thanks a lot, Jesus. Chiara, are you there?
Yes, good morning, everyone. And thank you very much and welcome to this webinar that we are organizing together. I am Chiara Giovannini. I am the Deputy Director General of ANEC. ANEC is the association representing consumers in standardization. We are very pleased to be with you today. Fernando, I think we can start with the housekeeping rules.
Yes, give me a second.
And this webinar is organized to present to you the standardization work to implement the European Accessibility Act. As you've heard, AccessibleEU is covering several strands of work, and they will present us more in detail, and they are also active in standardization. We therefore thought it was a very good idea to join forces to present to you and also to encourage you to participate in standardization. I can see we have a very high number of participants. We are very pleased about it. I can recognize some names from the ANEC membership, from the EDF membership, and you are all very welcome. Fernando, I think you might have already introduced yourself, or if not, I will leave you the floor to introduce yourself, as you will help me in this webinar today.
Yes, thanks a lot, Chiara. I'm Fernando Machicado. I'm the senior expert of AccessibleEU in charge of standardization. And why? Because I'm the secretary of the European technical committees on the standardization of the accessibility of the built environment and ICT accessibility. And besides, maybe some of you know me from when I was the secretary of the International ISO Technical Committee on Accessibility of the Built Environment. And I've been involved in many other projects, some of them collaborating with Chiara and Alec.
Thank you very much, Fernando. Indeed, we have a very long collaboration with also many of you today, with the EDF representatives, but not only. I would like to move to the housekeeping rules and to also remind you that first of all, we ask you, and you are all muted during the presentations. We are in a webinar format of Zoom. Use the QA panel to submit your questions. We will take them at the end of the session. But of course, we can also make some little breaks if the speakers are happy to answer immediately your questions. You have been all registering to get access to the Zoom. If not, please do it. And especially don't forget to fill in the satisfaction survey at the end. You know that this webinar is organized with the AccessibleEU Center, which is a EU project. And if you are familiar with EU projects, you know that it is important to have some indicators, and the satisfaction survey is one of them. So we thank you in advance for helping us to fulfill this indicator. You also see that we have the sign interpretation, and we would like to thank very much the interpreter. And on a personal note, if I speak too fast, please let me know, because I have this tendency. And we also have the captioning, and you can follow the webinar in the best way that you want. You can also use the chat to interact, but please, perhaps for the questions, really use the Q&A, as we might get distracted from the chat. Next, let's move to the next slide, please. And we will have two sessions today. First, we will present the AccessibleEU project, and the relevant standardization activities will follow. I will give the floor to Renaud in a minute to present AccessibleEU project. Then Fernando will take back the floor to explain a little bit more what is standardization and some reminders about standardization, the role of standards and the role of AccessibleEU. Next slide. I will, and then
the other part is for the second block.
Yes, and then I will anticipate to you, but I will then move to, we will move to the second part, where we will have a specific presentation of each of the standards that are going to be used to implement the European Accessibility Act. So now I will leave the floor to Renaud and for a presentation about AccessibleEU. And I can see, I can't see whether Renaud is connected. I suppose he is.
Yes. Hello,
yes.
Chiara.
Okay, Renaud, I will. Thank you very much. I will leave you briefly introduce yourself and the association you work for, and then you have 10 minutes to present us the project. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Chiara. I will try to share my screen. Please give me a minute. Even with a few years of Zoom experience, it's always a challenge for me. But can you see my slides? If someone can tell me.
Yes, we can, Renaud.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, dear participants. As Chiara mentioned, my name is Renaud Schoer. I'm the head of knowledge and innovation at EASPD. And as we discussed in this first block, we will start with a general presentation of the AccessibleEU project before we move on to discussing a bit more specifically the project's work on standardization. So, as I mentioned, I work at EASPD, the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities. We are a European NGO, and we represent over 20,000 services for persons with disabilities, stemming from 34 countries across Europe. And we are one of the senior partners of the AccessibleEU project. Which is what we will discuss now, starting maybe with one of the most basic questions: what is AccessibleEU? In the disability strategy that was published by the European Commission for this decade, AccessibleEU is listed as one of the flagship initiatives that is supposed to guide the work of the EU towards greater inclusion and the removal of barriers for persons with disabilities. More specifically, AccessibleEU is focused on creating a resource center to gather in one place all things linked to accessibility. So, for instance, built environment, transportation, ICT, policies, standardization. The idea is that AccessibleEU gathers all of these resources, practices, guidance, networks, so that we can have this one-stop shop, gathering all the different people and efforts designed to remove barriers, with the view of making sure that persons with disabilities can enjoy all areas of life on an equal basis with others. So that's an ambitious task for us. Thankfully, we have a good team to carry out this task. We are led in the project by Fundación ONCE from Spain, and we work together with the core partners EASPD, ENAT, the European Network for Accessible Tourism, JKU, Johannes Kepler University from Linz, and UNE, the Spanish Association for Standardization, as Fernando mentioned. We also work closely with the European Disability Forum, with Digital Europe, and with Age Platform Europe, and are supported by various other services. But that's not all. We also work with a great team of national experts from 27 different European countries. A lot of them are in the workshop today. Be reassured, I'm not going to read through the entire list now, but what I wanted to mention is that we are very proud to work with such a dedicated team of great experts. They will work hard to activate their network at national level and to apply their expertise so that we can enrich the quality of the resource center and of the events that we organize with AccessibleEU. So now that you know the team behind AccessibleEU, what is it that we are all coming together to work towards? Well, primarily, AccessibleEU is the project aims to support the effective implementation of EU laws on accessibility. To do that, we believe that one of the top priorities is the creation of this one-stop shop center on all things linked to accessibility. That is the AccessibleEU Resource Center, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And in the framework of this Resource Center, we conduct various activities. For instance, networking activities, capacity building activities, training. We develop studies, we develop guidance materials, we collect good practices, and so on. With regard to these activities, we have set some ambitious targets for ourselves. For instance, we aim to reach a large number of members in our community of practice. We also aim to reach a large number of references and practices collected on the online library of the Resource Center. And we also organize a significant number of events, this one being one of those. These events can be in person or online or hybrid, and they can be at European level or at national level. So these are indeed ambitious targets for us, but thankfully our core team and the national experts are working hard, and they are having a great impact, and therefore we are already making great progress towards these targets. Yes, regarding the events that I mentioned earlier, as you can see, they can be of various types based on the focus that we have, the size of the audience, and the outcome that we are aiming for. They can be focused on awareness raising, on training, or on networking, for instance. And in general, we encourage all of our partners working on accessibility to engage with the Resource Center and with the AccessibleEU events. So the type of stakeholders that we are trying to connect with, including via our community of practice, includes many different types of stakeholders. It can include, for instance, companies, service users and service providers, self-advocates and association of representatives, public authorities, industry professionals, researchers, and so on. So to summarize, if you are interested in accessibility, and if you are in this workshop, I assume that you are, then I strongly encourage you to engage with the AccessibleEU project and Resource Center. What you will find there is, first of all, a great community of practice to network with. Secondly, wealth of materials and resources gathered by national experts from all across Europe, and also produced by the core experts of the project. And this includes a library of content, but also training materials, guidance materials that you can learn from. And finally, we coordinate some key activities targeted towards mentoring compliance with the accessibility legislation. So if you are interested in all of this, I encourage you to visit the AccessibleEU website. You can find it here. I will also include the link in the chat. And I will ask the organizers to make the PowerPoint available to the participants in case it is of interest. But that was it for now for the general presentation of the project. If you have any questions, as Chiara said, please do not hesitate to put them in the Q&A panel. I thank you for your attention, and now I'm pleased to give the floor to Fernando from UNE. As he mentioned before, Fernando will discuss in a bit more details what the AccessibleEU project is working on with regard to standardization. Thank you very much.
Let me share my screen.
Thank you very much, Renaud. And while Fernando is uploading the slides, we, of course, have opened the Q&A facility if you want to ask questions. For the time being, I'm not seeing any questions because I suppose everything is very clear. You have the link to the website of AccessibleEU in the chat, and you can explore after our webinar the resources that are already there. Fernando, if you're ready, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Chiara. I have the same problem as Chiara. I tend to speak faster. so if you find that I'm going too fast, please tell me. So what are we going to see now? We're going to see the key standardization works at the EU level and what is AccessibleEU doing. The first question will be why standards? Because what are standards? Why should I be aware of them? Because if we don't understand that, we won't know why are we working on that, and why are we trying to support the standardization work supporting the European Accessibility Act. So trying to explain it very shortly, a standard is a voluntary document drafted with a consensus of all the relevant stakeholders. One of the key issues is that we want to increase the participation of representatives of persons with disabilities in the process. Following clear and transparent rules related to the vote, to the participation, to when can you send comments and when you cannot send comments, all those things, and that is publicly available. That doesn't mean that it's there for free. Also, AccessibleEU has uploaded some of them for free due to an agreement with Send and Select in the Accessibilitas platform. So if you are interested in that, register in Accessibilitas of Fundación 11, and most important, drafted and approved by a standardization body. So that's a standard. So the main question will be, if they are voluntary, which is their first characteristics, how can they be a lever of change? How can they make a difference? I'm going to try to give you three arguments. The first one is that standards are the state of the art. That means that they provide a common language to measure, to evaluate performance, to describe the different technical requirements needed. We will see some samples later. They help to ensure the interoperability of the components, of the services, of whatever. They help to improve the market of the European Union. They protect consumers, which is a very important thing because they ensure the safety, ensure the durability, ensure the market equity. They ensure also the sustainability of the products and services. So if if I want to be a great professional, or if I want to be a leading business, I think that you need to at least know the standards, if not engage in the standardization process. So that will be the first reason. If you want to be an excellent professional, you should be aware of standards. Second, agreement between parties can make standards mandatory. So that's a second. Somebody may oblige you to fulfill that, and we are not talking about regulations. If the standards are referenced in a private contract or in a public contract, that you need to fulfill it. So you need to know what are you signing that you're going to fulfill. And according to the new is from 2014, the Public Procurement Directive on the award criteria for all the procurement that is intended for use by natural persons, the technical specifications of that procurement process need to take into account accessibility because it's going to be used by natural persons. So some technical specifications, if they're included in the public procurement procedure, they will make they might describe technical specifications that are going to oblige you to consider accessibility. So how can that be done? One of the key things is to reference the technical specifications, and in that point, if you follow that way, the first preference is to reference European standards. Okay, so that's another good argument. And third argument, the harmonized standards. This is when you are obliged to fulfill due to regulation. So what are harmonized standards? Harmonized standard is a standard that provides the technical specifications needed for a product to respect the EU law, a specific EU directive or regulation. They complement and specify that requirements. For example, in the European Accessibility Act, there are some requirements also they have some detail. In other parts, it says that those products, those services should be accessible and gives us some indications, but of course, it doesn't enter into detail. And if you want to provide that product or service, or if you want to buy that product or service, or if you are a user and you want to make sure and check that what you have been sold or what your government has bought is accessible and fulfills those requirements, what do I need to check? So harmonized standards help and provide presumption of conformity with the relevant legislation. So that means once the European Commission has checked them and has published the reference in the official journal of the European Union, from that moment, if you fulfill all the essential requirements given in Annex A of that harmonized standard, you can stamp the CE marking, and you, as a consumer or as a user, should be sure that all the essential requirements of that directive are fulfilled by that product or service because they fulfill the parts related to the regulation given in that harmonized standard. So there's a specific annex that relates the essential clauses requirements of the directive with the clauses of the standard. So regarding accessibility, we have two key directives: the Web Accessibility Directive and the European Accessibility Act. And in order to give support to those directives, we have 3 harmonized standards that are currently being drafted. The first one is on the accessibility of non-information related to non-ICT information related to products, which is being drafted by Central Engineering Technical Committee 12 on Design for All. This same technical committee is drafting another one on accessibility of support services related to products and services. And TC from Entel, from ETSI Entel, Emergency Telecommunications, is drafting another standard on the accessibility of emergency communications and from the answering on emergency communication by the PSAs. Another 3 harmonized standards are being revised to be harmonized. One of them is 31549 on the accessibility of ICT products and services. which will be harmonized according to the European Accessibility Act and to the Web Accessibility Directive. This is drafted by HCTC Human Factors and under the responsibility of the CENSELEC Joint Technical Body on accessibility. Another standard that is being revised is the one on design for all and the standard on the accessibility of the built environment. We will see those in more detail later. So the next question will be, would you like to be a part of this? So I would like to invite you to join the standardization community and to join and meet your national standards body in order to participate in your national mirror committee, if you want in your national delegation, and to influence and share your knowledge at European level, if relevant, also at international level. And what's AccessibleEU doing to help this? We are present in the key European technical bodies related to the European Accessibility Act directly, because we have a liaison with CENSELEC that we have just started and we are putting in place, and also indirectly, because many of the AccessibleEU experts are also experts and leaders of those technical committees. And we are also promoting the participation of representatives of persons with disabilities and their knowledge on the key standards, as we are doing right now. So I invite you to join this key issue, to join standardization, and mainly standardization related to accessibility. And I give the floor to Chiara, who is going to enter us into the second panel, the second block.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for this very short but insightful presentation about standardization, about the role of standards with legislation and the role of AccessibleEU. I can see we had a couple of questions in the Q&A. We are going to take them later, as mentioned, and we are going to move now to the second part of our webinar, the expert panel on standardization. And I have the honor to present you the speakers of today. We will have Susanna Lorin from the Funka Foundation. She's the chair of the CENSELEC and ETSI Joint Technical Body on e-accessibility, developing the standard on accessibility of ICT. We will then have Florent Orsoni. He's from the École de Design Nantes Atlantique. He's the chair of the CENSELEC GTC 12, and you've seen they are already drafting 2 standards and revising 1 standard on design for all. And then I will give the floor back to Fernando for a presentation about the revision of the standard on accessibility of the built environment. I will then share our thoughts on the participation of consumers and persons with disabilities in standardization. I will give the floor to Alejandro from the European Disability Forum, and I will also share our experience with a call for all of you to participate in accessibility standardization. And Fernando will then bring us to the end by moderating the Q&As and the conclusions. So we will start with the first speaker, and I will like to invite Susanna to take the floor. Or I can see Susanna, I could see her. I can see a presentation on the screen. And Susanna, would you like to test your microphone?
Yes, I think my microphone is open now. Sorry, I wasn't really.
Yes, welcome, Susanna, and you have the floor. And very nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you. So do I share my own screen or do you share the slides? Or
whatever you prefer. If you prefer to share your screen, whatever you prefer, or I can share it for you. Whatever is easier for you.
I think it's easier for me to share the screen because then I know what I'm doing. That's usually...
Okay.
I shouldn't say that before because then something may go wrong when I say that, but I think I'm sharing now.
Yes, so Susanna, you will present us the revision of a standard which is already harmonized. and under the Web Accessibility Directive, and now it has to be harmonized under the European Accessibility Act. And you're going to tell us what these involve. Susanna, you have the floor.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. Good to see so many people interested in standardization. That always makes me happy because that's not the easiest thing to sell, but I think Fernando did a very good job in trying to convince you why this is so important. And I'm one of the dinosaurs here, having worked with standardization for a very long time, and I still think it's extremely important and also still interesting. So I just wanted to say something about the kind of the setup of all of this, because we are now in Europe talking about European standards, but of course there is a global level of standardization. I'm sure everyone has heard about the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, and then we have the International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC, and then the International Telecommunication Union, the ITU. And at the European or regional level, in this case the EU level, we have then the CEN, which is the European Organization for Standardization, but with the French acronym, and then CENELEC, which is the Electrotechnical European Standardization Organization, and the European Telecommunication Standards Institute that kind of lay under the global parts. And then at the national level, we of course have in the CEN and CENELEC system, we have national standardization bodies representing each of the member states or European countries. And then under ETSI, we have both end-user organizations and industry organizations and also other organizations. So there's a mix of organizations that can be ETSI members. So this is kind of the ecosystem, if you will, of where we are with the standardization requests from the European Commission, acting as presumed conformance for the European accessibility legislation. So when it comes to the EN 301549, this is a 3-logo standard, meaning that ETSI, CEN, and CENELEC are supposed to work together to make this happen, which I think is a very good idea. Then we get people from across the board and many different perspectives working together. The EN standard covers ICT in a very broad sense, so much more than just websites and apps. It's also hardware and so on. So it's a very broad ICT standard. As Chiara mentioned, it was originally developed to support the procurement directive. And then it was updated, well, it has been continuously updated, but it was then revised and updated to support the presumed conformance of the Web Accessibility Directive that entered into force a couple of years ago, and now we are revising again together with all the other standards bodies to make sure that we support, or that the standard supports the European Accessibility Act. So it has been kind of evolving over the years, and I think this is a very good sign that it's doing a lot of good and also can be very useful in different perspectives and in different situations. And of course, we do not only update to meet the conformance of EAA, but also this is a chance to make other revisions as well. The EN 301549 has also been a global success so far. It's implemented in Australia, in Kenya, in Mexico, and in a little bit more than a week, it will also be adopted in Canada and so on. So this is a good example where the European standards actually lead the way, and we move beyond what is happening, for example, in the US and so on with accessibility. So I think we can be very proud of this standard. It's not perfect because standards are always a combination of wills and kind of the a consensus-based procedure, of course, but just the fact that it has been used in so many other countries outside of the EU, I think is a very good sign that this standard is working the way it was intended. When it comes to the publication of this particular standard, it's ETSI who is the driving force, so to speak, and that is because ETSI has a business model where they provide standards free of charge. And this standard will be in English. So that is kind of the original, the standard, the real document here. But the national standardization organizations under CENELEC, they can, of course, translate, if they would like to, into local languages. And a handful of countries have already done this with the previous versions. And I sincerely hope they will continue to do that with this version as well, the new version that we are planning for next year. But they may charge for standards. So here we see the difference between how the business models in the ETSI universe and the national standardization bodies under CEN-CENELEC are, they differ. So some of the standards that are in local languages, the translations, are comes with a fee. You can always have the English version for free. And if there would be some kind of legal issue around this, then it's always the English original that is the original baseline document, the truth, so to speak. So if there would be any, I don't think there are any problems with the translations, but if there would be any interpretation issues or such. So what are we doing now? We are, there has been from ETSI side, organized or created a special task force, of course, with the editors and a small group of experts who are actually writing the updates and reviewing all the comments and so on. And this special task force is called 614. And we have got in the joint technical body, we have got the first draft proposal for the revised EN, and there is a lot of comments back and forth, both on the draft proposal, but also on other things that people in the standardization community wants to change or have questions about in the previous version of the EN. And we had a couple of weeks ago a joint technical body meeting where we discussed this proposal for the revision of the EN, and that is kind of exactly where we are right now. And the next draft we will have in September 2024. And then we hope to publish the standard during 2025. The main areas of discussion have been a long series of editorials and updates that are just things that people, including myself, think maybe are missing or could be clarified or made better. We have a long discussion on things on mobile apps that where the EN should be, I think, updated. Then, of course, the update to meet or to align with WCAG 2.2. So that is, I think, not any debate. We need to do that. But what has taken most time in the special task force and also the discussion with the joint technical body is the RTT, so the real-time text and the interoperability of real-time text, and also how this is meant to be tested end-to-end. So there has been a little bit of a heated debate around this, but I am confident that we are now moving forward, and there are also a couple of different proposals to solve these issues, and I'm really hoping that the next draft we will see, which I hope is before the official new draft in September, that we will have come to a conclusion and be in agreement with the different groups working on this so that we can leave the RTT discussion and move on to more constructive discussions on the rest of the EN. I would like to echo what Fernando says. There is a lot of need for more experts and perspectives in standardization. So we also encourage always people to get involved. And with the EN 301549 work, there is a very good opportunity because we now have a GitLab channel that you can follow all the discussions in. It's a long address, but it's https://labs.etsy.org/rep/hf/EN301549. I will post that also in the chat in a while. Here, anyone can follow the discussion. So it's a completely open and transparent discussion, which I'm very happy for because we have had, I think, very relevant criticism the last time in the last mandate. That it wasn't very easy to follow from the outside. So now anyone can actually follow this, and any member of a standardization organization can make comments directly in the GitLab. And for non-members, we have a little bit of a 19th century solution to this, but you can send an email to hfsupport@etsy.org. You can also email me and I'll make sure that it will be sent to Etsy. But that means that also people who are not part of the standardization groups, even if I would strongly encourage you to become part of that, but even if you're not for some reason, you can still make comments to the work on the EN. So that is what I have for now, and I hope I kept my short time period.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and we are even a little bit early. So we are getting some questions, but I think one very important question that Fernando already answered, but perhaps you can enlighten us a little bit more, is the timeline. Susanna, so you mentioned that it should be 2025. Do you think it's going to be the first, second half, and are delays possible?
So delays are always possible, I would say. Unfortunately, in standardization, we sometimes do experience delays, yes. So I cannot promise on my mother's grave or anything that we will be in time, but the plan is to publish a stable version of the standard in the first 6 months of 2025, because we have the Accessibility Act entering into force in June. So of course the goal is to have the standard in place before that, but there may be delays. I cannot say anything else than that.
Thank you very much. We can now move to our second speaker of the panel, Florent Orsoni. He's going to present us the work that Sensenelec Joint Technical Committee 12 on Design for All is going to do for the European Accessibility Act. It's 3 standards, and he's going to give us the details. Florent, would you like to share your screen, or are you happy for Fernando to turn the slides?
I think I'm sharing my screen. Do you think it's? Can you see it? Maybe.
We can see you, which is always very nice, but not your screen yet.
Let me check. Let me check. Ah, yes, it's still charging. So
that's okay. So
I will try.
Yes, please take your time to upload your presentation. And as we were mentioning, the Sensenelec Joint Technical Committee 12 is revising the standard on Design for All and developing 2 new standards that are going to be harmonized under the European Accessibility Act. We are still not seeing the presentation, Florence, so perhaps...
You don't have it?
No, perhaps I will. Yes, now we have it.
You have it?
And you are going to focus today on the revision of the Design for All standard and mentioning a little bit what is happening with the other 2 standards.
Yeah, I will focus maybe on the Design for All standard, and explain more what is it about, and of course on the revision and the different things. So we have I am a chair of GTC 12 Design for All. I am in the board of a school of design, which is important for me. So to explain also better what are the consequences in also for education, because Design for All you will see as a concrete consequence on organization, and so this is this is also I am also in charge of the accessibility and built environment standards in France and AccessibleEU representative for France. What is the purpose of Design for All, and especially the EN 17161? And this is what is important to understand. This is a process-driven approach, Design for All, in relation to all aspects of design, development, and manufacturing. So this is very large, and this is focused on the question of the global approach, and accessible products and services are the outcome of this. This is important to understand that. And in fact, I will try to explain more what is it about. This standard is about more on understanding the context of the organization, the needs and the expectation of the parties, the leadership, and the planning of Design for All objectives. So it's more, when we talk about this standard, it is more about planning and organization, understanding the concept and how you can act on this. For example, when I am in the board of the design school of Nantes Atlantic, so I will act with this design for all standard on built environment, information system, academy program, and diversity of students. This is what is interesting with this standard. So I will have an overview on the whole organization, and I will see how to plan this. I will also organize the support, the resource. In fact, this is more organization standard, the operational process related to for the users, for example, the process to monitor and how to measure. And I will also guarantee a process for the continuous improvement of the design for all approach, which is very interesting, in fact. So, for example, I will try to have an accessibility officer. I will try to have a end user centric process, which is very interesting, and ongoing improvement. For example, for the whole school, this is what are the difficulties, autism in our school, etc. So this is very, very concrete. And then, so this is the add-on, this is the work in progress. Will be in charge of support services, help desk, call centers, technical support, relay service, and training service. And how this could be accessible, how this is compatible with the assistive technology, how this is accessible in the different mode of communication. So how can I ensure that? Where to put that in the organization? How can I meet the specific needs? For the moment, we are still like looking around. What kind of change in the existing standards? Maybe also we are exploring that question, but what are the consequences when we have chatbot and when we have artificial intelligence? And what are the consequences also for that? And this is major because more and more we have artificial intelligence systems. So we will have to explore that. And of course, where can we go? Where can we move with that question? Where have we to be more precise than in that question? So this is a very interesting work that we have in the support services. But for the moment, I have more questions than answer. I'm sorry about that. This is more question, and we are trying to define the whole subject. Also, non-digital information related to product, which is very interesting for packaging, for example. What kind of question should I have on the packaging for? Of course, we will have to follow the requirements, etc. And what I say, so this is very important to have the question of help desk and technical support and support services. So a lot of questions for the moment. Sorry, I'm trying to, yeah. And we use like a methodology grid. This is an example of blueprint that I show. This is, for example, quality management, and this is where we are trying to do. So we have some case studies, and we have the user perspectives, the criteria, the service, and what could we change, etc. So this is really a process and how we can manage a better process and quality management on this. So you see a lot of questions. This is the methodology that we have. Sorry, I have problems in my, yeah. What is interesting also is the question, but Fernando mentioned it already. The organization shall evaluate the effectiveness of the design for all approach and accessibility outcomes. And this is interesting also because the organization has a responsibility to ensure the accessibility of this product and service. And this is interesting in our approach of design for all. because this is really focused on process. And this is more philosophically, if I can say, this design for approach and standards is like a system thinking approach, which is changing the nature of interaction between and the organization, changing the organization will help us to have finally a design for products which are fully accessible. This is very interesting to understand how the organization, the process could ensure finally the applicants and the applicants of the different standards. So this is very interesting. We are still working on that, still exploring that. And this is, in fact, we can do things. We have rules, and we will organize like the game inside it, like a football player. We have rules, and we'll try to change a little bit some organization, which is really interesting. So still a challenge that we have. To work on the process, to work on that, and maybe to ensure finally good appliance on the standards. And I am convinced that we need both. In fact, we need like measure, but we need also concretely to know how to organize the mess, if I can say, how to organize a good compliance, but not only the results, but also the organization. So this is where we are focusing in our standards.
Thank you very much, Florent. Indeed, we need both product requirements, services requirements, but also process management requirements. And it is the overall chain that is going to deliver accessibility at the end of the day. But to have a process without a requirement, it
Absolutely.
doesn't ensure the end result. On the other hand, to have only requirements without, especially in case of services, having a process behind, you are not sure about the end result. Thank you very much. We will take questions at the end. And I will now give the floor again to Fernando. Fernando, he's going now to speak as the secretary of Senelec Joint Technical Committee 11 on access to the built environment. He will present the revision of the standard that has been published a couple of years ago on accessibility of the built environment based on functional requirements to turn it into a harmonized standard with strict requirements. But first, before giving you the floor, Fernando, I would like to ask you whether these slides are going to be uploaded of this webinar are going to be uploaded on the AccessibleEU website, and when?
Yes, this is a great question because my colleagues from the other part of the team from Fundación 11 will be in charge of uploading them. I think that we upload them directly on the website of AccessibleEU in a few days. But Marianne, I trust in your criteria. Please answer in the chat, please, because everybody is asking the same. But we, as far as I know, we will upload them all in the website in a few days.
Thank you very much. So Fernando, please, you can start your presentation.
So what's about let's talk about this standard 17/210, which is on the accessibility of the built environment, and why is it important for you, or how can you contribute to it? Let me take it. So first of all, the questions that we are going to address is, why is this EN affected by the European Accessibility Act when the European Accessibility Act is mainly on products and services, not on the built environment? What is the European Commission doing, and what are Senelec doing to shape the standard up? First of all, the European Accessibility Act allows the different member states to decide if they want to transpose in their national transposition of the directive Annex 3 or not. Annex 3 is on the accessibility of the built environment. So many member states, surprisingly, have adopted this, have decided to adopt this Annex 3, and as it has to do with the built environment, we need a harmonized standard to provide presumption of conformity with it. Also, is always at harmonized standards are always one method, one way of assuming the presumption of conformity. You can follow alternative methods, but the simpler and the easier for you will be that. So that article that makes that allows member states to make compulsory Annex 3, and we will go to Annex 3 later, only applies to the services covered by the European Accessibility Act. So it doesn't apply to all the built environment, only to the built environment that, as Annex 3 says, that affects to the built environment in which a service is provided and which is under the responsibility of the service provider. So it limits the scope a bit. And under these two preconditions, it affects to the accessibility of the key issues of the built environment. The outdoor areas, the approach to the building, the entrance, the horizontal circulation, the vertical circulation, the toilets and sanitary facilities, the exit. So all the key elements of the built environment are covered, but only for the built environment in which a service covered by the European Accessibility Act is provided and which is under the responsibility of the service provider. Okay. This current EN, the current European standard that was published in 2021, that standard was described the basic minimum functional requirements and recommendations. So the key is that they were functional requirements. It also covered the design, construction, refurbishment, adaptation, and maintenance of buildings, of built environment, because it also covers the urban space. And it has a specific note that says that in the case of refurbishments or adaptations of existing buildings or infrastructures, a specific study, including feasibility, determines the extent to which the functional requirements and recommendations can be met. So that means that you need to fulfill the same functional requirements as the new built environment. But if you cannot, because you do a study and you show that you cannot fulfill it to the same extent, you need to justify. Okay, so this standard has several parts. We were structuring the first part is the scope, normative references, terms and definitions. Then there are two clauses on key horizontal aspects. And the main part for us will be clauses 6 to 13, which are the key elements of the built environment. And of course, also the part on fire safety for all, because exit is also included. There's also a clause on environmental conditions, and there are some clauses on specific uses that will mainly not be affected, apart from the parts covered by the European Accessibility Act, which are mainly, in this case, banks and transport facilities. So you can see in this slide a sample of one of the functional requirements given in this EN. There are very pretty figures showing which are the requirements. This is a very didactic standard. It always has a rationale before any of the requirements, explaining why you need to consider it. So let me read you one of those requirements. It says, for side clearance and maneuvering space at doors, the first requirement will be adequate maneuvering space should be provided between the leading edge of a door and a wall that is perpendicular to the doorway to allow opening of the door by a person using a wheel mobility device or a walking frame. Let me go to a second example. For the clear height of doors, it says doors should have adequate clear height to allow free passage. Okay, so and in the width it says door should have adequate clear width between the face of the door. So it always says adequate in those examples. And when we're talking about harmonized standard, the standards need to be the requirements need to be objective verifiable. So our problem is that adequate is not sufficient. Adequate was great in the first edition because it allowed you to use your national values. But some cases, adequate is not sufficient because you need to say, am I fulfilling this? Yes or no? And adequate is not objective verifiable. We need to investigate more and say which will be. So in order to shape this up, the European Commission launched a mandate at the end of 2022. And in this mandate, it said that we needed to review this standard for it to be harmonized according to the European Accessibility Act. So we have started the revision. The revision doesn't say functional requirements anymore. It says requirements and recommendations. This is being drafted by Science and Joint Technical Committee 11, which is led by Jesús Hernández Galán from Fundación 11, who is also the leader of AccessibleEU, and within a working group, and Nieves Peinado from ACEPAO and from CEAPAT, two Spanish organizations, is the convener of that working group. And the important thing is that any requirement given in a harmonized standard, let me go to this, needs to be objective verifiable, as I said before. That means that the approach of the revision is that only the parts affected by the European Accessibility will be revised. We are going to need some technical requirements to complement the functional requirements, and they will be taken mainly from ISO 21542, which is the international standard on the accessibility of the built environment, and from the European Technical Report 17621, which provides some examples of how to fulfill it. And right now we have some other groups that are assessing if the current functional requirements are objectively verifiable or not. The functional requirements will never be deleted. They will be complemented if needed by those new technical requirements. And right now we are using a table to assess, and we in this table we are checking which is the essential requirement given in the directive, which is the clause that we are studying, which is the specific point that we are considering, which is the functional requirement or given there, if it's objectively verifiable or not, and we are providing a suggestion, a proposal for change. We are not assessing this. This is right now our current dialogue. We are hoping to accelerate and speed up the process because we have a very long delay right now, like a 1 year delay. And as you see, we are right in the start. We've been working for 1 year and a bit, but we have a lot of work ahead. So it will be great to have some of you with us. And I spent a bit more time, sorry, but I will give the floor to Alejandro Molero, the Deputy Director and Head of Policy of the EDF. Alejandro, are you there?
Thank you very much, Fernando. Yeah, I'm here.
Good.
Do you want me to share the presentation?
If you don't mind, that will be useful.
Okay, no, absolutely no problem. 1 second.
Well, firstly, thank you very much to AccessibleEU and ANEC for inviting us to participate in this panel discussion. I'm Alejandro Moledo. I'm the Deputy Director and Head of Policy at the European Disability Forum. And I'm replacing my colleague Roberta Lulli, who is also working with me on standardization, as she had, unfortunately, a personal emergency to take care of. And but since my aim is also to become a dinosaur in standardization world, just like Susana, I'm happy to share with you our experience in standardization and also echo the encouragement for all of you to join this process. So next slide, please, Fernando. Firstly, for those who don't know us, the European Disability Forum, We are an umbrella organization, an organization of organizations representing persons with disabilities at European level. So our membership includes those European NGOs representing different disability groups, such as the European Blind Union, the European Union of the Deaf, Autism Europe, Inclusion Europe on people with intellectual disabilities, and also those organizations at national level that represent the disability community in their country, plus organizations that work in the disability rights field, such as ESPD or even Fundación Once as well. So our aim is basically to ensure that the EU and all member states and European countries implement the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and we do so by advocating for further policies and legislation, making sure that persons with disabilities are involved and have a say on policies affecting their life. Our motto, as you know well, is nothing about us without us. Next slide, please. So going into standardization, I feel that all the previous speakers already explained very well why standards are important and why we should be involved. But I would like to give you the perspective from EDF and why we contribute to standardization, and particularly standards related to accessibility, because everybody is in favor of accessibility. Nobody can say, it's really rare to hear somebody saying that they are against accessibility for persons with disabilities. But how to implement accessibility in practice is another story. This is where it gets tricky. It gets into the nitty-gritty detail, what is accessible, what is not. Standards are a tool to ensure that we have accessibility in a way that can be implementable. So it's a useful way to make sure that legislation, for example, concerning accessibility, such as the European Accessibility Act, can actually be a reality. So accessibility is not black and white, it's a broad range of grays in between, and standards help us to really identify the technical details that industry, public administrations, any organizations can actually take into consideration in their contracts, for example, in technical specifications of their contracts with other providers, or how to ensure that they are in line with this legislation. So we contribute to this standardization initiative that the European Commission has been putting forward since many, many years ago. As Fernando mentioned, firstly, it started with procurement, public procurement, but also European funds as well that are also have an obligation to take accessibility into consideration. And afterwards, with the adoption of specific accessibility legislation, such as the Web Accessibility Directive or the Accessibility Act, these standards that are meant to be harmonized and more important than ever, to ensure that the legislation is not just good words in a paper, but actually they are implementable. So we do advocate, we do try to influence the standards, those technical requirements to ensure that they are as ambitious as possible and they cover as much as possible, to ensure that then the legislation is well implemented by those concerns by the law, using the standard. We also work on a horizontal kind of policies regarding standardization in cooperation, obviously, with ANEC, with they are as you know, the Consumer Association represent in standardization. So this relates to the general legislation on standardization. Next slide. So on our involvement in the different standardization work, our aim, as I mentioned, is to really bring the perspective of the huge diversity of persons with disabilities into the standardization, different standardization fora. This is obviously challenging. There, as you already got by now, there are many different committees, different groups in which we need to be active, and our goal is to ensure that the lived experience of persons with disabilities are translated, if you wish, are translated into those technical requirements. And just to give you an example, and this is based on a real story, the lift directive also requires an accessibility standard in which ANEC has been working on, and some accessibility experts also within EDF and our members. And there was at some point somebody had the fabulous idea to propose that the braille in the buttons of the elevator should be in the buttons themselves. So for a blind person, this is actually tricky because you can accidentally press the button on the floor that you don't want to go. So all these kind of details, all these kind of lived experiences of persons with disabilities is what we try to bring into the standardization discussions, which again is very difficult. Apart from the technical committees leading with the standards that were already presented before, we are also active in other fora, advisory bodies to the European Commission, to the CEN, the European Organization for Standardization, and obviously within ANEC and also in ETSI, which is the organization for standardization in ICT mostly. Next slide, please. So I will not go very much into details about the different committees that we are trying to follow and bring our inputs in. Basically, we are prioritizing the 6 standards that are requested by the European Commission for the European Accessibility Act. So the built environment, the design for all standard, the standard for non-ICT information, those meaning basically that printed information on products, the standard on support services, not support services for persons with disabilities, but support services for the clients, like customer services, for the services included in the Accessibility Act. Obviously, the standard on ICT products and services, which is relevant also for the web directive, as you've heard, and also the standard on the communication with the public safety answering points, meaning the 112 emergency number call centers. And we are collaborating in these standards along with ENA, which is the European Emergency Number Association. Next slide, please. So our participation in all these different committees is basically thanks to it's based on what I just mentioned at the beginning, the principle that in the past persons with disabilities were always thought like objects and others were deciding for us, but thanks to the disability movement at international level and at national level, the principle of nothing about us without us, so being active decision makers on the policies and the kind of policy instruments as well, like standards that are affecting our lives, is crucial for us. And this is why we believe for the accessibility, for the standards related to accessibility, this is obviously something in which the disability movement, even if despite all the challenges that I will mention in a moment, is very important that disability organizations, we join forces and we are active in the standardization process. We need to, as I mentioned, we need to bring the proposals, the ideas, the lived experiences of persons with disabilities into the different domains that these different standards are tackling. And it is important that we do so in collaboration with experts as well. And this is where we want to kind of bring some sort of like co-design process and how we kind of shape our contributions to the standardization world. Next slide. By this co-designing process, I mean basically to partner with professionals that could help us to navigate and also transform these proposals that we have into technical requirements in standards, because we are an advocacy organizations. We are, let's say, activists, if you wish, experts on policies related to persons with disabilities, and we know what is the situation, thanks to our members, on the everyday lives of persons with disabilities. But for example, we are not engineers, we are not architects, and therefore we need to partner. And this is a takeaway that we've learned throughout these years. We need to also partner with technical people that are, that are sharing our costs and are like-minded, and can actually help us to identify how we can shape these barriers that we want to dismantle, or this further accessibility that we want to include in the standard, into a technical requirement in a standard that is, dealing with, electrotechnical issues that is out of our knowledge. So it's very important that when we get into standardization, we also partner with experts, and this is where the role that AccessibleEU can bring to the standardization is very important. So I would very much encourage all the disability activists in this panel to join, the different the possibilities to join with to partner with experts from AccessibleEU, from ANEC, from EDF as well, and see how we can bring your inputs into the different standards. I'd like also to mention that the standardization process or activities that we undertake in EDF is also in response to obligations of the CRPD. The convention actually requires the state parties to develop standards in the Article 4 on general obligations, and obviously are key to the implementation of Article 9 on accessibility. Next slide. But unfortunately, as you already got by now, the standardization system is quite difficult and challenging for disability organizations and consumer organizations to participate in. There is an unequal representation and influence between industry and consumers organizations, including when it comes, for example, to voting powers in one of the organizations, in ETSI, for example, in which, we can become members, but our votes will not be as strong as the votes of Google, for example. So it is important that we know these shortcomings, this kind of lack of these difficulties, if you wish, and also on top of that, the processes and the digital systems that the European standards bodies use are not very inclusive, are not accessible, and many times we struggle with the digital documents or the meetings, or there is no reasonable accommodation provided for experts, etc., etc. Obviously, this differs very much from standards body to standards body, but this would be like a general assumption kind of situation that we face. And lastly, there is the issue of lack of resources. Standardization is very time consuming. It also requires financial resources in some cases, even to get involved and to participate. In some cases, you need to pay participation fees, which makes no sense, but that's the way it is, and it's the business model of certain standardization bodies. You cannot access the published standards, and now thanks to AccessibleEU, we will have access to those key accessibility standards that were published by CEN and CELELEC that we didn't have access before. You had to pay for them. Even if you contributed to them, you had to pay to have access to them. But this is also the way it is. And despite everything, it's still very important to get involved in standardization. And now we'll conclude, next slide, with what we wish for the future to happen, in addition to having all these standards that we mentioned adopted and well implemented by everyone. What we wish is that in the future, the European Commission revises the European standardization regulations to make it more inclusive for consumers, including organizations representing persons with disabilities. And for accessibility, more specifically, what we are calling for is for the creation of a new European agency for accessibility, similar to what they have in the US. In the US, they have the US Access Board, which is the federal agency that sets the accessibility standards after listening to consumers and industry. Here, as you already kind of understood, the process is very much led by industry for industry, and it's challenging for the consumers and the disability organizations to have, opportunities on equal footing with the other stakeholders. So we would like the European Commission to build on the successes and all the resources that AccessibleEU is bringing to the table, is creating this community of practice, and based on that to create an agency that can be sustainable over time and can really become the go-to public body for all the expertise related to accessibility, and can be the body that could actually set or update the existing standards on accessibility or create future standards for other products and services which are not covered by the European Accessibility Act. So next slide, and I think I will conclude here. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any question.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. I will now share our experience on how to meet some of the challenges that you mentioned in terms of consumers of all ages and abilities participation in standardization. I will ask Fernando to kindly share the slides that I've prepared. I would like to restate the importance of participation of consumers and persons with disability in standardization, not only to give legitimacy to the system, but also to provide specific feedback on specific products and services. Fernando, are you still with us?
Yes, Chiara, you should be able to see the presentation, isn't?
Not
Can
yet.
you see it? No?
Not yet, no.
Oh, let me.
Yes, here it is. Perfect.
Oh, no.
Yes. Again, it's moving a bit. We saw each other in several, myself and the sign language interpreter. Yes, okay, that's fine.
Yes, right.
So let me very briefly summarize and restate some of the points that Alejandro made. Civil society representation in standardization is about redressing the imbalance. We know that there is a majority of industry participation, rightly so, but we also need civil society. We know that consumers and civil society groups are under-resourced and they rely on volunteers. The limited resources affect the ability. It means that there is an absence of civil society representation from the table where decisions are taken. We therefore have a urgent need to strengthen and to facilitate the participation of consumers and persons with disabilities in standardization. Therefore, the AccessibleEU Center role is key. There are a lot of resources there. We can use them to make our voice heard. Next. And consumers' perspective can contribute to the big picture. And as Alejandro already explained, we can show how we use products and services, the real life experience. We can also provide solutions to mitigate some of the risks of lack of accessibility and also the risks that are leading to harm. We can contribute to developing standards that are then used to develop products which are fit for purpose, safer, fairer, better quality, more sustainable and inclusive. It all sounds very not new for you, but those are the elements that I would like you to use at the national level in order to get national funding. We know it's very difficult. We know that you try. Several organizations are telling us that the national governments are not at all open to that. But with all this body of legislation on accessibility using standards, we think that they have to listen. Next. The funding is needed for consumers and stakeholders, civil society stakeholders organization to participate at the national level in the national standardization bodies, join a mirror committee to influence the national position and the national vote, and you can do that in your national language, but also to join the committee, the national delegation of a national standardization bodies in Senelec, so to be able to influence the work at the European level. You can also join a working group of Senelec as an independent consumer civil society expert, but you will only be able to submit technical comments. You can have a liaison status. You can again provide comments on the drafts, but you don't have a vote and you can't influence the national vote. We also have to remember that the inquiry process is open to everyone. You should be able to provide comments, and Susanna also explained to us an accessible system that has been introduced for the standard on e-accessibility. Next. We are now going to start the Q&A. I will leave the floor to Fernando for moderating it. We have already answered some of the questions in writing and also in the chat, but Fernando, we have several questions and we can ask the panel to address some of them in the 5 minutes that we have left.
Hello, can you see me? Okay, great. Let me try to, it's difficult for me to find the Q&A part here.
If you want, Fernando, I already had a little bit of a look at some of the questions, and I could perhaps already ask Alejandro very, very briefly, briefly, to answer the question on the first question we had. It's about the applicability of the Accessibility Act on the alternative methods. So if my bank provides a phone number that I can call to cancel the credit card, is it total conversation system mandatory, or they can provide an alternative?
They should provide an alternative, and the Act foresees that the support services to clients will have this kind of multimodality. So this is one of the standards that the Joint Technical Committee that Remy introduced will deal with.
Super, thank you very much. And as I have you here, I would like to also ask you the question from one of your members, Umberto, about the participation of persons with disabilities in standardization, because the products are just not enough accessible. Example, in airplanes where announcements are made orally without subtitles in videos.
Yes, in that particular example, the Act foresees that the real-time information must be accessible, and therefore there should be specified in the standard how to achieve this. So I imagine that by providing as the Act says, multiple, the information to be provided in different modes of or different channels, so by written information. We cannot, in standardization, we don't specify the specific solution. We give, or we are trying to shape the technical standard that will lead to a company or service provider to provide the solution with the fulfillment of the requirement of the Act. So in this particular case, I imagine that the solution will be by providing the information that is provided by audio, also in written.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, then I like to address one common question when I was checking them before, which was about the voluntary. If standards are voluntary, how can they support implementation of the directives and all these issues? The standards are voluntary, as I said before. If you, regarding the specific regulation, and in this case, the European Accessibility Act, when I'm going to focus on the accessibility of the built environment, which is the standard that I have presented. If in your country you have a requirement, your country has adopted the Annex 3, the Annex on the accessibility of the built environment, you will have two ways of showing that you are fulfilling the data session requirements relevant to the accessibility of the built environment. One will be fulfilling the harmonized standard that will be the new EN on the accessibility of the built environment once it is referenced in the official journal of the European Union. But in any case, you always can use an alternative method, but you need to just justify that you are fulfilling everything that needs to be fulfilled. So there's always standards. In this case, will be one method, the preferred method, in my opinion, and the safest method for you and for the consumer. But you will always be able to put a different requirement. Regarding the questions on the regulation, the standards, especially the standards supporting the regulations, cannot be in conflict with the regulation, nor the European regulations, nor the national regulations of the national members. And in this case, if we have any conflict, or if the member states discover any conflict, they are entitled to ask for aid deviations. That means that for example, in the current standard on the accessibility of the built environment, there's an annex that anybody can check with some aid deviations for Sweden. So in Sweden, there are some clauses where you cannot, you shouldn't just follow the European standard for those specific subclauses, but the national regulation, because the national regulation, the standard, is in conflict with those specific parts of the national regulation. And of course, what we try to do is to avoid any conflicts as much as possible. I think that may solve some of the questions that were written before.
Yes, thank you very much, Fernando. Indeed, this point came out several times. It's about how standards work, and especially harmonized standards. I think we are running out of time. Perhaps there is one last question we can take. It's an interesting one from Mathieu, and it's about the standards on accessibility of self-service terminals for the automated teller machines. Is it going to be discussed in GTC 11, 12, or GTB?
Okay, this is a point where we have things to be agreed still at the standardization level. Of course, all the ICT parts of the ATM are under the multimodality and all those issues are covered by the Sense and Legacy Joint Technical Body on accessibility. First of all, the parts of the hardware of the component are also being to be covered there. But there are some issues regarding reachability, reach ranges, heights, the clearance for your legs. All those issues could be described either in one of the standard, either on the other. In both of them, we still have to take some decisions. Right now, everything is described in the EN relevant to the ICT accessibility, because the current standard on the built environment makes direct reference to those requirements. Some experts think that some of those dimensions should be reviewed, and in fact, the standardization request launched by the European Commission asks to harmonize requirements. And so we still need to decide where to put them. If only one standard in both of them, in any case, there should be no contradiction, or there should be no contradiction. So, but this is something that still needs to be decided.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Florent.
It's yes, it's still under discussion, of course. Where are the different perimeters? I have had a comment. Fernando, I quote the yen the yen 17210, and yeah, this is why we have a coordination meeting to see where we stop, where we overlap sometime, etc. And we have like 3 months, every 3 months, this kind of coordination meeting. And we invite also the commission leaders to discuss on this. But it's a key question. It is a key question for us.
And in fact, just Susana, Florent, and the other persons inside of the management of those technical committees were discussing this specific point, that we still need some advances to clarify and to get agreement. But we are coordinated to avoid any conflict and to make sure that what we put in each of the documents is consistent with the other and that there are no contradictions.
And what I can add with Fernando is that in the standards, when you write the standards, in fact, we specifically say, refer to these standards to have more information on that. So this is, but your question is very useful because this is key, in fact, and we try to avoid this. Of course, not to avoid, but not to do that. We don't do that.
So thank you very much. We are reaching really the end of our webinar, and we are running a bit late. So I suggest that we pause for lunch now. And we would like to thank you very much for the very good questions and for your attendance today. Thank you very much to the panelists for the fantastic presentations and their answers, and to the AccessibleEU project for organizing and hosting the webinar, and for Fernando to do everything, basically. We encourage you again to go on the AccessibleEU website, where you will find all the information relevant and also the access to the resources. There have been a lot of questions on how can we find resources to participate in standardization, and you have to consider the AccessibleEU Center as one resource in kind, but still this is what the project is about. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and we also encourage you to follow the next events organized by the AccessibleEU Center. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Chiara.